You've heard the advice a million times. Set shared buffers to around 25% of your RAM. It's practically gospel in Postgres tuning, but why not 50%? Why not 75%? The answer is something most people completely miss. Postgres isn't the only thing caching your data.
Wait, what else is caching it?
The operating system's page cache. Every single read Postgres makes goes through the OS, and the OS keeps its own copy of those blocks in RAM, so you end up with double buffering, the exact same data sitting in both shared buffers and the page cache. That's what's really going on with the 25% rule. Let's talk about how Postgres and the OS actually share the work of caching.
So we're talking about two separate memory regions here.
Yeah, exactly. Two layers, each doing its own thing, they operate independently, but Postgres can benefit from the OS cache. When Postgres reads a page from disk, it asks the OS for that file block. The OS reads it, sticks it in the page cache, and hands it to Postgres. Postgres then stores it in shared buffers. Now that 8 KB block is living in two places, once in shared buffers, once in the page cache.
That sounds wasteful. Why keep it twice?
It is wasteful, but there's no way around it. Postgres can't tell the OS, hey, don't cache this, I've got it. The OS has no idea what Postgres is doing. They're completely independent layers. On Linux, you could use ODirect to bypass the page cache, but Postgres doesn't support that, and there are good reasons for that, which we'll get to. Shared buffers uses a clock sweep algorithm, which is a variant of LRU, but it uses a reference count to decide which pages to evict. When it's full and Postgres needs space, it kicks out pages based on their usage. But here's the thing, that evicted page is still sitting in the OS page cache. So if Postgres needs it again soon, it's a cheap read from RAM, not an expensive trip to disk.
So the OS cache is like a second chance layer?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It absorbs the working set that doesn't quite fit in shared buffers. Sequential scans are a perfect example. Postgres reads millions of rows once, doesn't want to fill up shared buffers with them, but the OS cache still speeds up any immediate rereads. The page cache also handles all file I/O, including wall and temp files, which Postgres doesn't put in shared buffers at all. Shared buffers holds table and index blocks that have been accessed, potentially including both frequently and infrequently accessed data. The OS page cache holds file blocks read by the kernel, which may include Postgres data such as tables, indexes, well files, and temp files from sorts and hashes, plus any data that got kicked out of shared buffers but was read recently.
So the OS cache is always bigger in scope?
Right. It's file-level caching, not database-aware. It has no clue what's a table versus a well segment. It just caches whatever file blocks the kernel reads. That's why you need to leave RAM for it. If you give Postgres 75% of your RAM for shared buffers, the OS cache gets starved, and suddenly your well writes, and sequential scans get slow.
Okay, so when does it actually make sense to go bigger than 25%?
Good question. The 25% rule is a safe default, but it's not some universal law. There are times when you'd tune it up or down. If shared buffers is too small, say under a gigabyte on a system with 16 GB of RAM, your working set won't fit, and you're constantly kicking out pages you need. You'll see high disk reads even though you've got plenty of free RAM sitting around. The OS cache helps, but it's not as efficient as Postgres's own buffer management for random access.
And too large?
If you go above 40% or so, you starve the OS cache. Memory pressure can affect overall system performance. Sequential scans hit disk more often. Checkpoint writes become bursty because there's less kernel buffer space to smooth them out. And on cloud providers like RDS, you don't even control the OS cache size. AWS tunes it for you, so pushing shared buffers too high just causes memory pressure.
So it's a balancing act.
Always. The optimal split depends on your workload. OLTP systems with a small, really hot working set do well with 25 to 30%. Data warehouses doing big scans benefit from leaving more for the OS cache, sometimes as low as 10 to 15% shared buffers, because most reads are sequential and won't be reused anyway. If your cache hit ratio is already 99% and your working set fits comfortably, there's no point going bigger. If you're doing huge analytical queries that scan terabytes, a giant shared buffers just wastes RAM. Those pages are read once and never touched again. And if you're on RDS or Aurora, stick close to 25%. Those platforms tune the OS layer for you, and going off script can cause swapping or OOM kills.
How do you know what your working set actually is?
That's where PG buffer cache comes in. It shows you exactly what's resident in shared buffers right now. Which tables, which indexes, how much of each. You can see if you're thrashing or if you've got headroom. Let's look at how to read it. PG buffer cache is an extension that exposes the contents of shared buffers as a table. Every row is one 8 KB buffer, and it tells you what relation it belongs to, whether it's dirty, and how recently it was used.
So you can see exactly what Postgres is caching?
Yep, it's like looking inside the buffer pool in real time. First, install the extension. Then this query shows you the top 10 relations by how much space they're taking in shared buffers. Each buffer is 8 KB, so we multiply the count by 8,192 and convert to megabytes. You can see here that the orders table is eating up 842 MB, and its primary key index is taking another 156 MB.
So if I've got a 2 GB shared buffers and orders is using 842 MB, that's almost half?
Right. If your working set is just a few big tables, you can size shared buffers to fit them. But if you've got hundreds of tables and the top 10 are taking 90% of the buffers, you might be thrashing, constantly kicking out pages from smaller tables that are also active. That's when you'd consider tuning up or looking at whether those big tables are actually frequently accessed or just scanned occasionally. The usage count column is incremented on buffer access and helps determine buffer eviction priority. Postgres uses this in its clock sweep algorithm to decide which buffers to keep and which to evict.
So if most buffers have a low usage count, that means you're not reusing them?
Exactly. If only 30% of your buffers have a usage count above 3, you're probably doing a lot of sequential scans or one-time reads. That's a sign you might not need a huge shared buffers. The OS cache will handle those just fine. On the other hand, if 80% of your buffers show high usage count, you've got a tight working set and you'd benefit from more space. By the way, my DBA's free health check does this analysis for you continuously. It tracks your cache hit ratio, looks at your RAM and provider, and hands you recommendations for shared buffers and effective cache size that fit your workload. No guessing, no manual tuning. It's graded across 16 domains and updated every week.
So it's watching this stuff in real time?
Yep, you connect your database, and within minutes, you've got a first report. Over the next week, it builds a full picture, buffer usage, query patterns, all of it, and keeps delivering fresh reports automatically.
I've always been confused about effective cache size. What's it actually doing?
It's just a hint to the query planner. It tells Postgres this much data can probably be found in RAM, both shared buffers and the OS cache combined. The planner uses it to estimate the cost of index scans versus sequential scans. If you set it too low, Postgres underestimates the benefit of indexes and picks sequence scans. If you set it too high, it overestimates and picks indexes even when a sequence scan would be faster. The default value is set based on your system's configuration, but it's often conservative for modern servers with lots of RAM. A good rule of thumb is 50 to 75% of your total RAM. It doesn't reserve that memory, it just tells the planner it's available.
All right, so if I'm tuning this from scratch, where do I start?
Start with the defaults. Measure, then adjust. Don't guess. First, check your cache hit ratio. That's in pgstat database. Blex hit divided by Blex hit plus Blex read. If you're above 99%, you're already in good shape. Then install PG buffer cache and see what's actually resident. Are your frequently accessed tables fitting? Is usage count high? If you're thrashing, tune up. If you're caching a ton of cold data, tune down.
And you said to check the OS cache too?
Yeah. On Linux, run free-h and look at the buff/cache line. That's your page cache. If it's tiny and you've got free RAM, you can afford to give Postgres more. If it's already using most of your RAM, be cautious with increasing shared buffers as it could contribute to swapping. Depending on overall memory usage and workload. On RDS or Aurora, you can't see this directly, so just stick to 25% and let AWS handle the rest. Finally, after you change shared buffers, update effective cache size to reflect the total memory available for disk caching. For example, on a 64 GB machine with 12 GB shared buffers, you might set effective cache size around 40 GB. But adjust this based on your actual system's memory usage patterns and available RAM for caching. The 25% rule exists because Postgres and the OS are partners, not competitors. You're not trying to maximize shared buffers, you're trying to maximize total cache efficiency across both layers. Sometimes that means bigger shared buffers, sometimes smaller. But it always means understanding what's actually happening in your buffer pool.
So the real answer is, it depends, but now we know what it depends on.
Exactly. It depends on your working set size, your read/write mix, your scan patterns, and whether you're on bare metal or a managed service. The tools are there. PG Buffer Cache, PG Stat Database, OS Metrics. Use them, measure and tune from evidence. If you want to see exactly how your shared buffers and cache are performing, connect your database to my DBE for a free health check. You'll get a full report on your buffer cache hit ratio, provider-aware config recommendations, and continuous weekly reports as your workload evolves. It's free. It takes a few minutes, and you'll see real findings right away.
And it keeps running, so you're not just getting a one-time snapshot?
Right. It's continuous monitoring with deterministic, runnable fixes, the exact tuning guidance, not vague advice. Head to my dba.dev and connect your database. You'll have your first health check in minutes.